Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this. Observe the behavior. Here's what you're hearing. This is a little plugin called XLowpass. Now the deal with this is I've been doing some work on trying to do filters that are inspired by people's fondness of old sampler DSP. In particular, EMU samplers had an interesting way of implementing the DSP that a lot of analog modeling folks aren't interested in doing because it's basically a weird implementation with a bunch of distortion. Well, if anybody likes distortion, I like distortion, so I made one that does this. It overloads a little less when you've got it up in the high frequencies like this, but this is a pretty weird plugin nonetheless. This gain control is more or less unity gain around 0.5. Frequency control is low frequencies to around 20K or so. And nuke, of course, is where the fun lies. What this is actually doing is running multiple poles of this weird distorted filter I came up with. So you can kind of dial in the degree of just complete insanity that you'd like. You can use the gain to tone down the intensity of it a little bit. Although nuke is always going to have a lot of extra intensity. And we can adjust it in this way so that the input is kind of padded, frequency is really low, and the difference between a relatively flat sound like this, where we're not padding it much and it's acting kind of like a regular EQ, although it's still not completely normal, and something like this, is that we've got a weird quality of distorting the filters internally, and that's happening per pole of the filter. So nuke adds more poles of the filter, and that makes it more intense. And of course, if we wanted to get silly with it, we could do something like, let me go and add Mackity. A bit of searching, because there are many plugins here. There it is. So if we pad the output, and then throw this in, we can do some strange things with a otherwise normal recording. And we can even use the dry wet on XLowpass get a combination of weird craziness and a reasonably normal style sound. And Mackity's doing this. So there you have it, basically. Now XLowpass, here, let me tell it to be a little quieter. I've got Mackity as an output pad, so I can make the whole thing quiet down a little bit here, even though it's going completely bonkers. Yeah, so the deal with XLowpass is this is a first stage of exploration with regard to me trying to emulate the EMU sampler stuff that people wanted me to work on. I've even been rearranging things so that I'm looking into getting some of the fancier samplers, but first things first is getting a kind of functionality that's in the right ballpark so that I can go on and do a more accurate version at some future time. I'll set it to that. That is a distorted filter without Mackity this time. And I can boost the gain a little bit just as a bit of a background sound for me. And the idea here is that when you're doing this kind of stuff, the reason people wanted these old sampler filters, even though they're kind of strange implementations, is because they're not like perfect biquad filters. I can do that, and I have biquad filters that you can use, but these act different. Like the grindiness in there is not part of what the real filter would be doing, but it is what XLowpass is going to do. And then of course you can throw on Mackity or something and digitally emulate some of the madness that people got up to with their classic samplers and their overdriving Mackies and stuff like that, and making noises like this. For the purpose of your darker kind of insane drum and bass weirdness, or just whatever you would want to do extreme distorted things with. And of course, if you're not going into distortion stages after the fact, you can end up with a sound kind of like the one you're hearing, where it's not wildly over distorted, but if you push the gain on it, you can definitely get a tonal quality that's not part of the regular biquad filter, and that's because the internal parts of the filter are distorting. But this is not the same as a rail sampler would be doing it, because this is using Airwindows density for the distortion factor, and I'm also fooling with it to get a wider variety of weirdness going on in the course of operating the filter. So we can push it quite hard, but it's not really clipping on the output of the filter at all. It's clipping inside it. and I think I'm just kind of playing with it more than doing anything useful at this point. So tell you what, I'm going to stop and try to explain. There's actually not that much else to explain about this. XLowpass is the beginning of a series of filters like this that I'm going to be doing. And I guess that's worth explaining. Last week I didn't put out a plugin because last week I put out the first of my Mac VST signed plugins, because I'm trying to port everything over to the M1 processor, and that's a lot of work. So I've got all of my AUs out, and XLowpass is coming out as a signed audio unit that's built in. It's part of the download. And I'm up to about A in the VSTs. A bunch of people have been downloading them, but nobody has said a single thing pro or con as far as whether they're working or not. I assume that if they were broken, I would be hearing about it. So I'm assuming my technology as far as making the Mac VST M1 plugins is actually working fine. If not, please let me know. That way I can update things before I make hundreds of them. I've also got various other things going on, like I'm going to have to replace my water heater in my place because it is producing an enormous leak, and that is potentially a problem. So I'm Chris from Airwindows. I do all of this myself, and sometimes when stuff piles up on me, it's a little difficult to keep everything going. But the M1 VSTs, M1 Mac VSTs are going. They're just stuck at A right now. It's the plugin starting with A. And we're beginning to work on these filters inspired by the Z-plane filters in the EMU E6400, which is the hardware that I've got. And that's the one that people wanted me to do. I am going to go into getting more hardware supported by my Patreon. That's how I pay for things like this sampler that I'm working on. And the sampler is currently inspiring me to begin work on a series of filter plugins. You'll note that this plugin is called XLowpass. I've also got highpass, bandpass. I might experiment with seeing whether a notch is any good. And you should try to load the plugin relevant to what you're trying to do. I don't want to do an enormous Swiss Army knife kind of plugin because that's not really how I roll. But X is not Z. And Z is what you would expect for if I was doing a Z-plane thing, which I won't entirely exactly be doing. X is for the basic concept of the distorted filters and getting some of these ducks in a row so that I have something working interestingly and usefully. There's going to be a Y series. The Y series is inspired by the question, why? And hopefully that's what you'll feel like when trying them, because if you think the X plugins are bonkers, the Y plugins will be even more so, notably because the X plugin distorts without going into wavefolding. That doesn't have to be the case with the Y plugins. The Y plugins can distort internally while also going into wavefolding, and that will be a really bonkers sound. So I should have a set of plugins like that, and then once I've got those things sorted out, and hopefully have the Mac VSTs taken care of, we can start talking about the Z series, which will not be EMU Z-plane code, because I don't have that. But what I'll be doing is what I did with Mackity, where I have the actual hardware, and while these earlier ones, it also fills in the alphabet as far as the plugins are concerned. Eventually I'll have a plugin for every letter of the alphabet, but X and Y are Airwindows style, and they are about doing interesting EQ things like I would do them. And then once I've got enough experience with that, The Z series will still be Airwindows plugins, and they will still be my code, and not emu code. But I'll be designing and voicing them to sound as much as I can make them sound like the hardware that I've got. That being kind of the point of picking up this old hardware. And I'm not exactly sure how that's going to go, but we have a lot of opportunity to try it out. So yeah, got my work cut out for me. I would also like to mention that there's been some nice little developments in other ways. For instance, if you remember my Airwindows chord slide rule from, I don't know, a month ago or so, a fellow on the internet who I've written in addition to that post on the Airwindows website has seen fit to do a web page that acts like the chord slide rule, which was very cool. And so I've linked to it, and I will put a link to it in this post. And yeah, thank you very much for that, because it might prove handy for folks. As long as that link is up, you should be able to take advantage of that. And on that note, I kind of have to go and make dinner and have a bit of lie down and post the rest of this, because I have tomorrow for maybe starting on X highpass or X bandpass or X notch pass, because I'm not exactly sure which I'm going to follow this up on. I suppose I could even do Y-lowpass, but I think I'd like to do the range of X filter plugins. But I'll be doing that tomorrow on my live stream. And then with a bit of luck on Tuesday, I can have a plumber in to look at the leaking hot water heater before I have worse problems. And then on Wednesday, I had been doing the DIY streams, and I will be returning to that. But last week, I dove into doing modular synthesizer jams, because it's been a really long time since I've done anything like that, and it was kind of fun. If you'd like to talk about that kind of stuff more, I won't take up any more of your time here, and catch up with me on Monday or Wednesday or whenever. On that note, thank you very much. I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.